Hi everyone, I'm Mike Green, Public Information Officer in the Allen County Commissioner's Office, and welcome to Countyline, where this month we're coming to you from the City County Building on East Main Street, a building where in about a year's time from now you will see a major transformation, one that will affect the operations of not only Allen County government, but City of Fort Wayne government as well. Allen County Commissioner Nelson Peters, who is President of the Board of Commissioners, has been involved in this intimately since the beginning of it, and he's taken some time out to join us and to explain a little bit about what will be taking place over the next year or so. Commissioner Peters, thanks for being with us.
I appreciate it.
I think the history of all of this has been pretty well documented, but in case there are folks who are not familiar with it, this all goes back pretty much, I guess, to June of 2009. It
really does. There had been some rumblings in the offing that the city was talking about pulling up stakes and moving over to a building on East Berry. And finally, we received a letter that suggested they were going to do exactly that. And we responded that it might be nice if we could stick around for a while and see if there were the possibilities of maintaining some co-located basis with them in that building as well as the city-county building.
And from there was a committee formed, a task force to kind of study what would work best for city and county government in two buildings.
There really was. It was sort of a peacekeeping mechanism at worst, which consisted of the mayor, the commissioners, some members of city council, some members of county council. And the purpose really was just to make sure that we were all on board with the idea of co-locating people in the two buildings.
So the decision was made to move most of administrative government functions for both the city and county over to 200 East Berry, which we now know will be named Citizens Square. This building, which is owned by the county, is going to be transformed, as we mentioned, in a major way. What's going to be the fate of this building for the future?
Well, ultimately, that was the decision that was made. There was some understanding that it was going to be cheaper to build out public safety in a building that for all intents and purposes was already constructed in that manner. But you're absolutely right. There are going to be some major changes. You're going to see police inhabit primarily the first and second floors. You're going to see the escalator behind us disappear. You're going to see the atrium behind us remain just to continue to provide some light for some of the folks, because we had already done some construction for what we call the finance group, which consists of the recorder, the treasurer, the assessor, and the auditor. Over in the other wing, we're going to retain that at this particular point. But all of this that you see right now, a year from now, will look entirely different and will begin to house both city and county police as well as the city fire department.
So in other words, if you pay your taxes, if you need a deed recorded, if you want to talk to someone about the assessment of your property, this would still be the building you would come to.
That's absolutely right. And what we tried to do was keep those functions for which people would normally have those types of financial related questions in this building, so they wouldn't have to reorient, reacclimate themselves to a new building.
So as we mentioned, administrative offices, the Commissioner's office, for example, the Mayor's office, several other city and county departments will be moving over to Citizens Square from the city-county building, but there will be some other county offices moving there as well that are not housed here.
That's correct. We've got, beginning probably mid-May, I think the city is going to begin to take some of their offices out of this building. I think they wanted to give it a test run to work out some of the bugs before the county actually began to move. And I suspect by July 1st or so, we will begin to move a number of the offices. We'll move the commissioners out of here. We'll move a number of the folks that are up on the 5th and the 6th floors out of here, and that will follow very soon after the city's completed its move.
But you've also got the building department and highway departments that will be moving over there from their current location.
That's right. We're doing a lot of shuffling right now. The highway department, the building department will be moving over to the new building. Part of the idea is to see if we can't vacate an entire building so that we've got something to take to the bottom line at the end of the day, so that we've got something that we can actually take back to the taxpayers. Ultimately, it would be great to have a vacant building that we can turn around and sell to help fund some of this particular move.
Now, the renovations to this building, which will include housing of public safety, include some measures that you're going to have to take to help ensure security in this building, because obviously you're going to have some security needs, and I know that was something that that you folks were very cognizant of.
It was. There's going to be basically a 24-hour vestibule that will be essentially behind me once this building is reconstructed for people who need access to the building sort of after hours. There will be metal detectors during the daytime. There will probably be cameras, there will be other sensors, there will be keyless entries to a number of the various offices that are going to be housed in this building. So yeah, security was preeminent in the minds of the commissioners when we decided to spend some of the dollars that we did to refurbish this building.
Now, along with some of the major renovations taking place on some of the upper floors, people have heard talk about the need to abate asbestos within this building, and that's something that kind of came up kind of at the last minute. Can you explain a little bit about how that happened?
Well, when we sat down and we talked about co-locating and refurbishing this building, the question that was initially asked was, can it be done? Can the people be physically moved in to this building in a reasonable sort of way? The answer was yes, and the price tag was slated to be right around $4 million to do that. In the process of developing the plans, the concern of asbestos came up. Now, let me say that right now this building is very safe. It will continue to be safe. But nonetheless, it was an issue that came up that hadn't been considered as a part of the actual build-out and moving people into this building. The abatement is something that would have to be done in any rehabilitation or if this building were knocked down. So it is a cost that the commissioners did ultimately incur, which is something that we would have had to have done sometime in the future anyways. And frankly, I'd rather pay the price right now than what the cost might be in the future.
And as you mentioned, the building is safe right now. And I think in layman's terms, if you don't disturb the materials which contain asbestos, which are currently here, if they're not disturbed, they don't hurt anyone. It's when you do that renovation work that you're going to be moving that stuff around. That's when you start having problems. And important to point out to folks that when that abatement process takes place, this building, those areas of the building where it's taking place, will be empty at that time.
Part of the reason that we got the bid as low as we got on the asbestos abatement was because there isn't going to be anybody here. But even if there were, they have taken such precautions to ensure that for the safety of the workers and anybody else who may be around, that there won't be any issues and that will be a safe environment to make sure that's done.
You recently awarded bids for both the asbestos work and also for the renovation work in several different phases. You were pretty happy, I believe, with the way those bids came in.
We were very delighted. We initially had a $4 million building budget, and the bids came in at about $3.1 million. Now you've got to figure architectural fees and a few things on top of that, but they did indeed come in below what we anticipated. And so, you know, I can actually look taxpayers in the face and say that we were able to come in under budget with this project.
In your opinion, what do you think is going to be the biggest benefit for taxpayers with these two buildings now being shared by both city and county?
You know, Mike, one of the guiding principles in making sure this was all done and done correctly was efficiencies. We truly believe that there are going to be efficiencies that are going to be gained for people who go over to the new building. They will see permitting type departments on the same floor. for people who need to deal with public safety. They're going to be able to come right to one building. And on top of that, you've got people that are going to be talking to people on a regular basis. Not that they didn't before, but they're almost forced to now because they're in the same environment, whether it is in the civilian side or the public safety side.
It's more likely because of their proximity to one another that they'll be working together.
Yes, absolutely.
And I know this is a big undertaking, probably one of the biggest undertakings since you've been commissioner that your office has been involved in, and you're looking forward to it.
We really are. We're actually looking forward to getting it done. It has been a work in progress. We've had some great people working with us to make sure that we can get this done under budget and get everybody situated where they need to be so that we can provide greater efficiencies to taxpayers.
Well, we appreciate your time and explaining a little of this for folks who may not be as familiar with it or aware of the nuts and bolts of what will be taking place, and we are looking forward to it as well. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks, Mike. Appreciate you having me today.
And we want folks to know that as changes take place within this building, as the move over to 200 East Berry takes place, we'll be pumping out a lot of information through our website, www.allencounty.us, through our Twitter and Facebook pages. We will be keeping you up to date so that you're aware of changes that are taking place in both this building and over at Citizen Square. For 25 years now, the Maumee River Basin Commission has been aiding residents in Allen and surrounding counties, helping citizens to learn more about the dangers of flooding and also measures they can take to help protect themselves and their property. Joining us today is Rodney Rankenberger. He's Executive Director with the Maumee River Basin Commission, and we're going to talk to him about the organization, how it got started, and the help it can provide to residents. Rod, we appreciate your time today.
Thank you for having me.
25 years now. Tell us a little bit about how things got started back in 1986.
Well, yeah, 25 years, that seems like a long time, but yet it seems like at the same time we only started yesterday. Basically, the commission was initiated back in after the 1978 and 82 floods. There was a lot of foresight amongst some of the local leaders that flooding in Fort Wayne was a regional problem instead of just a Fort Wayne problem. And that was basically the what precipitated the going to the legislature and approaching the Indiana General Assembly to form the Maumee River Basin Commission.
And a lot of the work you do is before flooding occurs. You're really in terms of helping folks before a major catastrophe happens.
Yeah, with our charter to mitigate the future flood damages, you're absolutely right. Our primary mission is pre-disaster mitigation. A lot of times we try to do property acquisitions, buy people's homes and remove them from the floodplain, before a flood ever happens. We do some retrofitting where that might include either relocating a structure into a safer environment. It might include just elevating it up a little bit to take it out of harm's way. But all of our focus is primarily on pre-disaster mitigation efforts.
We hear sometimes about the 100-year flood, and I know that sometimes gets people confused. They're watching the calendar to see if it's about time for the flood to come around, but that's really not what the 100-year flood means, is it?
Yes. Actually, I really don't like that term. It's a term that it's been around for many, many years, and those of us in the floodplain management arena liken to look at it more from a percentage of occurrence. And what they call the 100-year flood here locally has a 1% annual chance of occurrence. And a lot of people, as you sort of alluded to, think that it only happens once every 100 years. Well, we can have 2 or 3 1% events in a given year. Hopefully not.
Yeah. Now, the MRBC works very closely with the counties in our area, Allen County, obviously one of them, working close with Department of Planning Services and with other agencies, right?
Yes. Department of Planning Services, very heavily involved in terms of ordinances, because again, on the pre-disaster side, we try to put protective measures in place to, our goal is to keep people out of harm's way. Right. Also with the buyout acquisition program. And then we also work extremely closely with the Allen County Surveyor's Office. A lot of the floodplains in Allen County and the surrounding counties have just not been identified. It was just a lack of funding. And back when the National Flood Insurance Program issued the first maps for Allen County, which would have been in the very early 1980s, the commission has sort of taken on the role of trying to do additional studies and identify those flood risk areas on streams that haven't been identified yet. So we work very closely with the surveyor's office in that regard.
You brought up flood insurance. Let's talk a little bit about that and the importance of people having flood insurance if they need. And probably that's the one thing people ask themselves: do I need flood insurance? And for some folks, based on where they reside, it's pretty obvious, but it might not be for others.
Yeah. There's a big misunderstanding, and maybe we should cover that first on who can and cannot buy flood insurance. Believe it or not, contrary to any type of rumor or myth, anyone, as long as your community, which Allen County and Fort Wayne do participate in the National Flood Insurance Program, anyone can buy flood insurance. There's a lot of myths that you have to be in a flood risk area. Mm-hmm. That's not true, because 25% of all flood damages actually occur outside of the identified flood risk areas. So, but we need to make sure that people, they may want to know, do I or do I not have to have it? If you have a mortgage, the federal requirements are that your lender shall require you to carry flood insurance. Now, the system needs tweaked a little bit, because there's probably between 5,000 and 6,000 properties, or I should say actual structures, residential structures in Allen County that are in flood risk areas. But when I look at the reports of the number of policies that have been issued, there's a stark difference. So
people not getting the insurance who need it?
People not being forced to carry the flood insurance. When we have a disaster, Mike, that really weighs heavily on the local community as well as the flood victim themselves. If you have flood insurance, it makes our ability to help you much greater than if you don't. If you don't have flood insurance, you're totally at the mercy of hoping that the community, number one, will get a presidential disaster declaration, and number two, that we're successful in bringing federal dollars to help them out. If they have flood insurance, makes life a lot easier, because they're going to get that help initially.
How does, unless again it's pretty obvious to an individual property owner who may see recurring flooding and obviously realize they need it, but if someone is wondering if they should have it, how do they go about determining whether they might want to at least seriously consider getting flood insurance?
Couple different ways. They can contact the Allen County Fort Wayne Department of Planning Services. There are folks there that are trained that can identify whether their property is in or out of a flood risk area. They can contact the Allen County Surveyor's Office or the Maumee River Basin Commission. Any of us three agencies, or they can even contact the Indiana Department of Natural Resources. So a number of different agencies, and we're all there to help. If you're an individual and you're questioning, should I or shouldn't I, we can tell you whether you're in a flood zone. Then it depends on whether you have a mortgage or not. If you don't have a mortgage, there's no requirement that you have to have the insurance, although we strongly urge them to purchase it.
Well, as we mentioned, your organization very involved in terms of dealing with matters before flooding. But as time has gone along, you're telling me that you're also dealing with during and after flooding. You're also involved with programs in terms of teaching people how to protect themselves in the case of a flood and what to do afterward.
That, and probably the biggest thing that we're known for is being an assisting agency. We're not the lead. We come in and assist the other local government entities as well as individuals, but we're probably most famous for, or notorious for, our assistance in the acquisition, property acquisition program. That really took a catapult after the 2003 flood. where we had significant flood damage in the city of Decatur and here in the city of Fort Wayne. We assisted both cities in writing their grants for FEMA, and that allowed, like in Decatur, it was like $2.6 million brought in to buy properties, and about $3 million here in the city of Fort Wayne.
And I know just recently, for example, in the River Haven area, there were a couple of properties just recently, I believe, purchased that are in floodplain. Thanks in no small part to a grant, I believe, that the Maumee River Basin Commission was able to get.
Yeah. And one thing that has really been sort of frustrating on our end, and when I say our end, our meaning the entire region, as we become more successful in mitigating our flood damages, it makes it more difficult to meet that threshold for securing federal funding or that quote-unquote presidential disaster declaration. So it's sort of the unintended consequences actions of we're mitigating those future flood damages, but yet the way the federal system is set up, it really inhibits the local communities that are really doing a great job from meeting that threshold for future declarations.
Well, what would you like to see changed as far as that goes?
Well, what I'd like to see changed is if communities are being very aggressive and proactive to mitigate their future flood damages, I think FEMA needs to recognize that and maybe give them a lower threshold, or at least give them consideration that, you know, yeah, maybe you've mitigated 50% of your properties, but what about the other 50% that still need mitigated? And that, I think that's where the system just needs tweaked a little bit, that we don't work ourselves into a position where I know I and all the other local community officials, we don't want to see this, our success inhibit or cause you know, a lack of our ability to obtain federal funds for future flood victims.
Well, what would you like to see the Maumee River Basin Commission do in the future? Any goals in mind for the years to come?
Probably one of our biggest goals and most achievable, just because of limited funding, would be to study all of the unstudied streams in the 6-county area that we cover. There's quite a few areas, streams and rivers, that have never been studied for flood risk zoning. And we really need to get that, because as we're sitting here today, somebody may be driving down the road and look at an empty piece of property and not knowing that it's in a flood zone. They purchase it, put a home up, then you and I and the rest of the taxpayers end up buying that home up or out the next time it floods. So if we can identify those flood risk areas to begin with, I think that I think we're doing a pretty good job with our ordinances, because we're very progressive. We have higher standards than what even the state standards are. But we need that because we are a very volatile flood risk area.
They have been hard lessons learned, in other words.
Yeah.
Well, that may take you another 25 years to get all of that done.
Yes.
But that's a worthy goal. Rod, we appreciate your time today explaining a little bit about Maumee River Basin Commission, how it works, and how it can help folks in Allen and surrounding counties dealing with flooding matters, hopefully before they get to be really big problems. Thanks again for being with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
We're in one of the courtrooms here in the Allen County Courthouse, and where I'm sitting specifically is the jury box. We thought today we would take some time to explain to you the jury selection process and what's expected of you if you are called to serve on a jury. And joining us right now is Jeff Leffers. Jeff is the Director of Court Operations here in Allen County. Jeff, thanks for your time.
Well, you're welcome. Glad to be here, and thank you for coming. I just wanted to give you a little background information on our jury system just before we get started here. First of all, more than a decade ago, our judges in the Allen Superior Court, they decided they needed to do something to make jury service a little less burdensome and even more enjoyable for the citizens of Allen County. And they worked with the Indiana Supreme Court, and together they created some new jury rules that enabled any county in Indiana to, instead of having their somewhat antiquated jury system that's been around for decades, to change to a one-day one jury system, meaning they would have to report only for 1 day or one jury trial during their term of service, as opposed to the old way, which was a 3-month period of service, and they might have to come in here 5 or 6 times.
How burdensome is it for someone to serve on a jury from your standpoint?
Well, now it's less onerous. It's something that they can gain a lot of information from. It's one of the most important and vital parts of our local government. It's so important that we have jurors here to serve. We don't want to make it more difficult for them to fulfill this civic obligation. So we want to do everything we can, and Judge Frangal, the Allen Superior Court, took the lead in the state to change our jury system so we can make it less burdensome and a little more palatable because of the time and energy it takes for citizens to come and serve. And we're trying to lessen that, but now it's not nearly what it used to be.
And just about everybody in Allen County is eligible to serve on a jury.
Yes. Allen County has a population of about 350,000. Anyone 18 years old or older potentially could be in the jury pool. Now, that means there's probably about 250,000 individuals in a jury pool. If you have a Bureau of Motor Vehicles driver's license or an ID, or you have some record from the Department of Revenue or voter registration, then you are eligible to serve on jury duty.
And when that happens, you will get a summons. And two of the women who are involved here in the Allen courts, Tamika Chapman and Lynn Murphy, who both handle and are responsible for handling jurors here in the court system. And Tamika, tell us a little bit about the process of notifying people when they are eligible for jury duty.
Well, once we get the questionnaires in from people, which we send about 800 of those out a week, once we get those in, they are scanned into our system, at which point the computer will pull out those that are qualified and those that are disqualified. The qualified people will then get a summons in the mail, at which point they are told to report on a certain day at a specific time.
And when you say qualified or disqualified, what would be some of the circumstances where a person might be disqualified?
There is one automatic disqualification, and that's for people that are over 75 years old. Some other instances that might disqualify one is maybe no child care, financial burden, they don't get paid from work, so that sort of thing.
Okay. So it's not a system that's set up to force you to come in if you have a good reason that you can't be here.
Right.
Okay. And Lynn, she talked about 800 some odd of these going out every week. Of that pool, what do you choose from in determining who will be summoned to come down and serve?
Well, do you mean who's qualified to? Right. They have to be 18 years of age or older. They have to be a current resident of Allen County, a citizen of the United States, and able to read, write, speak, and understand the English language.
And out of the 850, how many do you have actually come down to the courthouse to serve?
Well, out of the 850, on a weekly basis, we need about 425 to 450 jurors. So if they're qualified in our qualified wheel, then they could be summoned to appear.
And then once they are summoned and come down, what type of, I guess, instruction do they get?
There's a video that was produced by the Indiana Supreme Court. It's about 18 minutes long. It kind of gives the juror a brief overview of what to expect once they get up to the courtroom. And they also get some just localized information from one of us as to, just different things around here where restrooms are, that sort of thing, drinking fountains, telephones, that sort of thing. So just some basic, instruction from us as well.
And even when they get here and they undergo that, that's no certainty that they're actually going to be serving on a jury.
No, it's not, and because of the fact that their names are randomized when they're put on the jury panel, the first person that checked in might be the last name on the list, depending. It is randomized again by the computer. So.
But you do need that pool that you have here because something could happen that a person for some reason or another can't serve, and you have to pull another name out immediately. You can't wait to send out more questionnaires again.
No, absolutely. Sometimes it seems like there's we've got all these people here just for a 12-person jury trial. But there are reasons. A person may not have child care for the next day. A person may, be going out of town, have plane tickets. So the judge and the attorneys are allowed to excuse them for whatever reason, and we'll have more to. Generally, people that come in for jury duty, if they're not serving on a trial, they're out of here and done by lunchtime. So.
And you have a number of trials going on simultaneously. It's not like you've got one trial a week or something. You've got civil cases, criminal cases, small claim. I mean, you've got a bunch of different trials going on at one time.
Yes, we do.
Okay. And there's a compensation for this?
Yes. Just for the juror coming in and checking in with us at our office, it's $15. If they're actually selected to serve then and sit on that trial, then they're paid $40 a day. And we also compensate them for their mileage according to their zip code, and that is round trip.
Now, some people may wonder, when I get there, can I take notes during a trial? Is that permitted? How does that work? Who determines that eventually?
The judge. That is up to the judge. The judge and the attorneys are very good with explaining the whole process to the jurors in the courtroom, and they speak plain English anymore. It's not all that legalese stuff. So they tell you how long the trial is going to last, what is expected of you. That they do that up in the courtroom. So,
do you think people, once they've served, would come away saying, not quite like what I saw on TV or in the movies? It's not quite that way.
It's not quite as dramatic most of the time. And most people, when they get a summons from us, they of course complain and they've got reasons why they can't and such. But then most of the people, once they walk away from here, actually do say, that was kind of a nice experience. I'm glad I was able to participate.
And as Jeff mentioned, a very important experience for people to partake in if they're called on. Tamika and Lynn, thanks for being with us. We appreciate you kind of demystifying a little bit about the jury selection process, so folks can keep an eye out for that if they get a summons in the mail. Well, that'll do it for our visit here at the Allen County Courthouse, and that's also all the time we have for this edition of County Line. We thank you for joining us. We want to remind you that you can see this program again, not only on public access television, but on our video on demand website. The easiest way to get to that is to go to www.allencounty.us and look for the video on demand button. Also remind you that Allen County government puts out a lot of information on our social media sites, and we hope you'll join us on our Facebook page, follow us on our Twitter feed, and also watch us on YouTube, where we'll keep you up to date on what's going on in Allen County government. I'm Mike Green, the Public Information Officer in the Allen County Commissioner's Office. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on County Line.